Joining us now to have more discussion surrounding this is Ruth Wasserman Lande. She is an Israeli politician, diplomat, and activist, and kind enough to join us yet again on the Fox 5 Live Zone. Ruth, always good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Good to be on.
So you heard what the gentleman had to say with regard to the Israeli prime minister. We know that Benjamin Netanyahu got a chance to speak to the UN General Assembly earlier today. While doing so, he talked a lot about Iran, stating that if Iran actually attacks Israel, you best believe they will attack Iran. I'm curious, your thoughts on all that the prime minister had to say?
Well, first of all, I want to make clear that my political views, I belong to the opposition to Netanyahu. But that's exactly the point, that this transcends politics, in my humble opinion. I think that the issue here is very simply the fact that there is the Islamic Republic of Iran that is a threat, but a serious deep-rooted threat that has been preparing and premeditating the entire October 7th attacks, but also the very nature of the infiltration into the West, the cells that are in existence in and throughout Europe, the fact that there are in mosques incitement throughout the United States, the actual funding of demonstrations and of public opinion on campuses throughout the U.S., not to mention, of course, the de facto smuggling of weapons via Jordan into the West Bank for the Hamas and to Lebanon by the arms of the Hezbollah. So this is de facto arming the designated terror organizations that have killed not only Israelis and not only Jews, but Americans and foreign soldiers and civilians for years and years. This is something that is almost missing in the rhetoric of the international arena, and it's quite beyond my comprehension, because it is a true threat not only to Israel. Israel is currently at the forefront, but it won't remain there.
Yeah, and we also know that the prime minister has, in essence, frustrated U.S. officials this week by really sending mixed messages, if you will, over accepting a U.S.-led proposal for a 21-day ceasefire. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. There's something very, very important about not accepting that ceasefire, and I should perhaps try and explain. The Hezbollah has been actually incessantly bombarding Israel for the past 11 and a half months. In fact, once the Gaza attack began, the day after, before the IDF even went into Gaza to retaliate, the Hezbollah, without any provocation whatsoever, began to send rockets, many rockets, into Israeli sovereign territory and onto civilians and institutions and so on, without stopping, by making Israeli civilians go into shelters almost on a daily basis, many times a day, that is, mothers, fathers, children, and so on. Farms had been absolutely ruined throughout the north, 60 to 70,000 civilians completely displaced. I'm talking about almost 1 year. And the entire universe was silent about a ceasefire. And suddenly, very surprisingly, the second that a sovereign country, an independent state such as Israel, forget the fact that it is a democracy, but an independent sovereign state takes the initiative to actually return security, not to attack, after truly exercising restraint, I would say even inhuman restraint for 11 months, suddenly the idea of a ceasefire has come up. It's astounding.
Yeah. So, Ruth, we have about 3 minutes left, and I guess the million-dollar question is, when does this end, and how does this end in your mind?
Okay, well, very, very simply, it's not only in my mind. First of all, 60 to 70,000 Israeli civilians have the right to return to their homes and live without the fear of Radwan forces, which are the commando terrorist forces of the Hezbollah coming to massacre, rape, and carnage them like the Hamas did in the south. That's, I would say, quite a plain and understood right of civilians. So the security of those civilians needs to be returned. How do we see this returned? By simply making sure that UN resolutions pertaining to the movement of the Hezbollah to the Litani River, this is something that the UN, the international arena, had decided 18 years ago and was not implemented, despite the fact that the UN is paying for a UN force, UNIFIL, which does nothing. And the Hezbollah commando terrorists sit on top of the living rooms of Israeli villages on top of the border, not only maintaining a distance, but also fully armed. It's insane. Absolutely insane. All they have to do is disarm, because they're a designated terrorist organization holding Lebanon captive, and move back to the Litani River, thereby making the safe return of Israeli civilians possible to the north. That's it.
Yeah, well, ultimately, we all want peace in the Middle East. Once again, we have been joined with Ruth Wasserman Lande. She's an Israeli politician, diplomat, and activist. Ruth, thank you so much. I know you're busy. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. One of the many things we will continue to cover right here.